The following program, NORML Show Live, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate for the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate or encourage any illegal activity and advise all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws by visiting NORML.org, NORML.org. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers of NORML Show Live are their own and do not necessarily reflect the philosophy and policies of NORML. Listener discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think we need to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws presents NORML Show Live, Marijuana Nation. Now, here's your host, NORML's Outreach Coordinator, Radical Russ Belville.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to NORML Show Live. It is Tuesday, March 2nd, 2010, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. I'm your host here for the next 60 minutes of news, talk, interviews, music, comedy, science, information, and more by, for, and about the cannabis community. And joining us in our virtual studio in beautiful Astoria, Oregon, my good friend and half sister and a great cake maker, Cannabis Carrie.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Russ.
What?
Anytime you need a cake, I'm your girl.
I'm telling you, Carrie makes the best cakes in the whole world. Tell them about your Bob Marley's birthday cake that you do every year.
Oh God, it's massive. It's a cake for about 300 to 300 people. It's huge. I have to have 3 people carry it in, and it's just a giant party we have every year for Bob Marley's birthday. So we make a beautiful birthday cake to celebrate Bob Marley.
Carrie's boyfriend plays in a reggae band, and they're called Ma Barley. So Ma Barley, and they play for that, and they get great response up here in the Pacific Northwest. So shout out to Ma Barley today. Hey, Carrie does our news from CannabisFantastic.com, and what headlines are we looking forward to today?
Well, we're going to go to Minnesota, where it looks like advocates have pretty much written off 2010. We're going to also go to statewide insurance because, you know, life comes at you pretty fast. And the International Narcotics Control Strategy Report was released yesterday, so we're going to go over some of the deets of that.
All right. We'll check that out in our news right after our first break. Thank you, Carrie, for bringing that to us. Also, want to remind folks that change.org, the website, if you go out there to change.org, they've got a question that's very, very important to us here at NORML and with regards to marijuana. For links, check out our chat room. I know there's a few people in the chat room that have been talking about it, and I'm sure they'll post the link to get you out there to change.org. Currently, we're at number 7 in the listings on our question. We want to raise that up to number 1. I know that we've done this before. We've done the change.org and the change.gov and the open for questions. And every time we get marijuana legalization up to the top of the listings, we tend to get ignored. But you know what? We just got to keep asking the question. Remember what I always say, when we're talking about it, we're winning. Now, today is our Electric Tuesday and our Daily Toker Tunes, so right after the news, we'll be hearing from Sarah Kant from Massachusetts. She'll be bringing some great electronica music for today. In our California Marijuana Report, we're going to get a live report, recorded live just a few minutes ago, at the courthouse where Eugene Davidovich in San Diego was just getting out of trial. We'll get the latest information on that. And a CBS News undercover investigation in California at medical marijuana clinics has me fuming mad, and you'll get a little bit of radical rant about that toward the end of the show. So stick around. We've got plenty coming up here on NORML Show Live, the voice of the marijuana nation. Follow us on Twitter at Radical Russ. Check out our blog at stash.normal.org. We'll be right back after this. Stick around.
You're listening to NORML Show Live, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Hello, I'm Paul Stanford from the Hemp and Cannabis Foundation, or THCF. Medical marijuana is legal in 13 states today, and THCF has clinics in 8 of those states. Our doctors help qualified patients obtain an authorization for medical marijuana in their state. Patients are eligible for medical marijuana with a history of either severe chronic pain and or nausea, cancer, AIDS or HIV, hepatitis, glaucoma, seizure disorders like epilepsy, chronic muscle spasms such as in multiple sclerosis or asthma, neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, and gastrointestinal disorders like IBS or Crohn's disease. If you or someone you know has one of these conditions, our doctors will help you obtain a permit for medical marijuana. THCF Medical Clinics has offices in Washington State, Oregon, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Nevada, Montana, and now Michigan. Call 1-800-723-0188 or go to the web at hemp.org or 1-800-723-0188.
You want to legalize it? Call your congressman today. 202-224-3121. It's free, it's easy, and you don't even have to give your name, just your zip code, and they'll hook you up to your congressman. Call 202-224-3121 and tell Congress you support marijuana legalization.
Liberate your mind. Liberate your mind. Liberate your mind. Liberate your mind. That's what you got to do. Liberate your mind.
Medical marijuana, industrial hemp, consumer cannabis. It's time for this week's NORML News with Cannabis Carrie.
Advocates of legalizing medical marijuana for chronically and terminally ill patients in Minnesota have decided to scale back their campaign to try and pass legislation this year. The reason, according to Minnesotans for Compassionate Care, is due to the current governor, Tim Pawlenty, and his mighty veto pen. In 2009, both chambers at the Capitol passed medical marijuana legislation with bipartisan support, only to have the governor veto the legislation. Medical marijuana advocates had hinted at trying to pass a constitutional amendment this session to bypass Governor Pawlenty, but that won't be the plan for 2010. The decision to scale back their efforts for another year is because Governor Pawlenty has recently said that he is not seeking re-election this year. According to their website, they prefer to deny Pawlenty the pleasure of vetoing any marijuana legislation in his last few months in office. The focus of activists now is on 2011 and trying to put a supportive gubernatorial candidate in office. Currently, Minnesotans for Compassionate Care is working with the law enforcement lobby to see if they can answer questions and learn about objections from that particular group. Even with their 2010 plans off the table, pro-cannabis activists from that state are gearing up for a busy political season.
I can understand what they're doing there in Minnesota with Governor Pawlenty there. You know, he's going to veto anything that comes across with medical marijuana, period. So yeah, you don't want to, throw all your efforts and your organizing and your volunteering and your money and your political capital at something only to have one guy stand in the way of medical marijuana that could help so many people. And the other thing, too, is when this Minnesota medical marijuana law was last vetoed, you got to understand that when it was first written, it was written as a fairly standard medical marijuana bill. There's a fairly standard template out there that allows, a few plants, a little bit of medicine, and most of your qualifying conditions. And in negotiations to try to get it past Pawlenty's desk, they started paring away at this bill. They started chopping out the right to home grow. They made it so that you had to have not just a chronic condition, but a terminal condition, like 6 months to live, and you had to try all the other pharmaceutical remedies first, and only then, if they didn't work, could you get medical marijuana. So it was one of those things where, yeah, it's sad when a medical marijuana bill gets vetoed, but if one had to get vetoed, at least it was the worst one, right? The most restrictive medical marijuana bill. And this is something I'm going to be addressing at the end of the show in my radical rant, and that is this future, this arc of medical marijuana in the United States and how it's just becoming stricter and stricter. But I did want to address one thing in this story that Carrie mentioned, and that is how they wanted to go back and lobby and compromise and work with members of the law enforcement community to try to figure out how they're going to do a medical marijuana program. Because, if you want an expert opinion on medicine, the person to go to is a cop. This is something that comes up time and time and time again every time I cover these medical marijuana stories, is that the primary groups that end up being lobbied with are law enforcement groups, which makes no sense whatsoever. If this is supposed to be a medical program, then let's bring in doctors, let's bring in nurses, let's bring in patients and ask them what they need from the medical marijuana program. But no, because marijuana is illegal for healthy people, and because law enforcement needs a bright, clear line that delineates the sick and disabled people who are allowed to use non-toxic cannabis versus the healthy, able-bodied people who aren't allowed to use non-toxic cannabis, they want that bright line so they'll know who to arrest. So they'll know whose plants to tear down, whose homes to burst into, whose kids to take away, whose jobs to ruin, whose lives to ruin. So once again, it just illustrates that we need to legalize marijuana for all people, or we'll never get the medical rights for the people who truly need it.
A California-based insurer has begun to offer insurance coverage specifically for the medical marijuana industry. According to the Sacramento Bee, Mike Abril, a commercial agent and national director of statewide insurance newly formed medical marijuana specialty division, said that they can provide insurance to many aspects of the medical marijuana industry in all 50 states.
Oh.
Now, only 14 states currently allow medical marijuana, but the new program is now in place, so when other states come on board, statewide insurance will be ready to insure with no delay. Abril says that he has insurance plans for all aspects of a medical marijuana dispensary, including workers' compensation, general liability, auto insurance for motor vehicles used to transport product, equipment breakdown and damage, property and product loss, including pot spoilage, and operations related to marijuana growing. Abril began the process of forming statewide marijuana dispensary unit in 2007 and has clients in several states. Premiums range from about $650 annually up to $25,000 a year, with numerous variables affecting the price. Typical policies have annual premiums in the $1,000 to $4,000 range. Max Del Real, who has represented dispensaries in other segments of the medical marijuana industry throughout California, said growers remain the most unprotected group. He says this program is needed as growers move out of residential areas and into commercial and industrial space, saying a lot of people are trying to get their minds around the cultivation of medical marijuana. He warns that local governments have to decide issues such as if they will require insurance for dispensaries, and sees that all of the individual communities passing their own dispensary laws is becoming problematic.
Yeah, it is. And boy, a story like this kind of tears me in two directions. On one side, I'm happy to hear this story because the more businesses that get their fingers into the pie of marijuana and realize that there's money in them in our buds, the more likely we are to break down the walls of prohibition that restrict us, that imprison us here with marijuana. So on that side, I see this dispensary insurance as a good thing in that here's a mainstream industry, a mainstream insurance broker who's wishing to get involved and make some money off of this very niche industry. And I think that's great. But on the other hand, there's another part of me that's a little bit skeptical. Because number one, it's an insurance company. So right there, insurance companies make me very, very nervous. And number two, when Carrie started reading off some of the things that they were going to insure, I heard one thing, equipment losses or product losses. I'm wondering, Carrie, did you get any news on that? Does it include when the DEA comes and raids these places and smashes up all their equipment and takes all their medicine? Do you know about that?
I'm not sure, but I do have that agent's number. Maybe I'll give him a call and have him clarify it, and we'll hook up on our Friday update.
Yeah, that would be good to know, because I know in some insurance policies, they'll insure X, Y, or Z, but there's always an exception if it was involved in like a lawsuit or a legal proceeding or some commission of a crime. So it'd be interesting to find that out. Now, if we find out that they do cover the smash and grabs, if they do cover the stuff that's broken and stolen by the cops when they break and raid these dispensaries, well, then that does set up kind of a perverse incentive to maintain the system the way it is, right? Because if marijuana is legal for everyone, the DEA isn't coming in and bursting into these dispensaries and smashing stuff up, and therefore people don't need insurance for that, right? You see where I'm getting at here? And the other thing, too, that there was that insurance for the operations involved in running the dispensary. I wonder if that includes legal fees for defense in federal court. Because then, once again, we've got that perverse incentive set up to maintain the status quo, to maintain the legality of medical while we continue the prohibition for healthy people, so that there will be that conflict between federal and state law, and so these insurers will actually have something to insure. We'll keep our eye on this, and like we say, when we get to our Friday updates, probably we'll have some more information for you.
The annual International Narcotics Control Strategy Report was released by the U.S. State Department yesterday, and not surprisingly, marijuana production is way up.
Yay!
Marijuana production in Mexico is, in Mexico, Russ. Marijuana production in Mexico is estimated by the group to be up a staggering 35% in 2009.
Ooh.
According to the reports, between $8 and $25 billion of drug profits were sent to Mexico from the U.S. last year, despite Mexican President Felipe Calderon's efforts against organized crime, which has resulted in thousands of deaths. The State Department said that the Mexican president's campaign against illegal drugs has led to the arrest of 36,332 people last year, and that number includes 10 high-profile cartel members. Also in the report, the productions of other illicit drugs, such as cocaine and heroin, fell in Colombia and Afghanistan during the same period. The U.S. estimates nearly 30,000 acres in Mexico are dedicated for growing marijuana. Now, just by comparison, Colombia, the largest producer of coca, reduced its land cultivation use by about 28%, which means it has 295,000 acres, and Afghanistan, the largest producer of poppies, reduced land cultivation by 22% down to 300,000 acres. David Johnson, the Assistant Secretary of the State for the International Narcotics and Law Enforcement, said, "We are dealing with the millions on a problem that is best expressed with billions, and so we need to make further progress in the financial institution piece of this." Russ, I'm sure you have a few suggestions to attack the financial piece for him.
Well, sure. You know, we've always said we'd be willing to put the Mexican cartels out of business. Just let us grow our own. We're really, really good at it. This International Narcotics Report, of course, all international drug war boils down to the 1961 Single Convention Treaty that Harry Anslinger, the drugs are, folks don't realize this, they understand Harry Anslinger was the guy in the 30s, who was a former prohibitionist, alcohol prohibitionist, who then formed the Federal Bureau of Narcotics and set a lot of this reefer madness into play. But what a lot of people don't realize about him, he was in that position from like 1937 to 1962. Okay, so for an entire generation, all of our drug control strategy and reefer madness propaganda came from this one guy, Harry J. Anslinger. And in 1961, he persuaded President Kennedy to strong-arm the UN into getting all these international countries, all the UN member countries, to sign on to this Single Convention Treaty. One thing I would note here is that you can note the poppies in Afghanistan, the cocaine in Colombia, and the marijuana in Mexico. All of that illegal drug trade leads right back to funding terrorism, to funding murders, to funding disgusting acts of inhumanity. And again, it's just because drugs remain illegal. We don't see this kind of barbarity over the alcohol trade or over the cigarette trade. So just again, we need to legalize marijuana for all people, or this is never, ever going to end very well. Another thing, Carrie mentioned the point about following up on the bank side of things. This is another kind of untold story of the drug war, in that all these big cartels and these big drug gangs that have millions and billions of dollars, that money has to get laundered somewhere. And if we started taking some rich white bankers off of Wall Street in chains and make them do the perp walk for laundering some of this drug money, you'd see a lot of this drug trade dry up real quickly. All right, folks, it's a special time. It's 20 after the hour, time for us to take our daily break. For those of you out on the East Coast, it's a special time for you. For the rest of us, we will join you in solidarity.
It's 20 after the hour, and we have to take a short break, if you know what I mean. Please support these sponsors who support NORML Show Live.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you
ever met that funny reefer man? Reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would tell you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
Law420.com. Hello, I'm Russ Belville, Outreach Coordinator for NORML. In my job, I read literally hundreds of headlines each month involving nonviolent, productive citizens whose lives are ripped apart by a marijuana or drug arrest. Many citizens could avoid arrest by refusing police searches and remaining silent, but police are well trained to confuse and intimidate. That's why you have a right to speak to an attorney before answering any police questions. I hope you never need to exercise that right, but if you do, make your first call to the law offices of John C. Lucy IV. John Lucy is an accomplished criminal defense attorney with expertise in Oregon's medical marijuana law. John Lucy understands and respects cannabis and drug consumers of all backgrounds. Call John C. Lucy IV at 503-227-6000 or visit in downtown Portland. Address available at law420.com. That's John C. Lucy IV at 503-227-6000 or visit law420.com today.
76% of Americans no longer support arresting and jailing marijuana smokers, and nearly as many support the medical patients having access to medical marijuana. And over 80% of our citizens now believe the war on drugs is an ineffective failure. So the question is, when will the government's misguided war on adult marijuana smokers finally end? When? Simple. When you and your like-minded friends, family, and coworkers get involved with an organization such as the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, also known as NORML. My name is Keith Stropp, and I founded the organization in 1970. Contact us at NORML, toll-free, 888-67-NORML, or by visiting the organization's up-to-date webpage at www.norml.org.
It's time for your Daily Toker Tunes, the best in 420-friendly music from all genres that uplifts, entertains, and informs the public. Our PodSafe music is donated by freedom-loving musicians who support our goal of ending adult marijuana prohibition. Today we bring you tunes for Electric Tuesday, our segment featuring the best of modern electronic music in the genres of dance, new age, house, and electronica. Brought to you by Sarah Kant Photography. If you'd like to submit your song to be played on NORML Show Live, send it to us at stash@norml.org. Now, here's some great independent marijuana music for today's Daily Toker Tunes. All right, we go all the way up to the eastern seaboard in the beautiful Commonwealth of Massachusetts for our good friend Sarah Kant and some more electronica. Sarah, how are you this fine day?
A bit stressed out. How are you, Russ?
Oh, you must have missed me yesterday, man. I was totally stressed out yesterday. Well, must be something going around here. Tell us about our tune that we've got for today.
Okay. Claes, a.k.a. Claes Wickstrom, began to get into creating music in the mid-'90s when asked to write lyrics and sing in a friend's project. He decided singing was not for him, but he had very much gotten the bug of programming and sampling. Along with P. Blomgren, a.k.a. Drool Machine, the Albert Forehead Project, doing largely experimental electronica, was formed shortly thereafter and still continues today. Several years ago, he started the solo project Claes, a pun on his first name, the music of which has been played regularly on local radio in Stockholm, Sweden, not far from Claes' hometown of Malmö. While he continues his work in the mode of experimental electronica, he has now widened his sphere to include psychedelia, funk, jazz, and ambient sound. He's also part of rising artistic community Sonskivor, which I can't say because it's Swedish, and a postgrad. While perhaps a bit more repetitive than I'd normally choose for the stash, there's just something about this track. Maybe it's that Miss Chiba is a prime example of how repetitive is not always bad in mixed-genre instrumental electronica. It paints a soundscape building into a crescendo of beat and melody, and then softly bring you back down from the musical high right back to the start. This song somehow manages to be both unobtrusive and catchy, possibly depending on one's level of sobriety. Claes Wickstrom and all of his ventures can be enjoyed on his website at claes.com, that's CLAJS.com, SoundCloud at username CLAJS, Artist Server, and GarageBand at username CLAJS.
All right. Well, we'll get that link up there in the chat room for everyone. This is Clace with the song Mishiba. We'll be right back. right, that's Clace with Mishiba for our Electric Tuesday Electronica Music. Thank you, Sarah, for that tune. When we come back, we're going to get a report from Eric Brenner for the California Marijuana Report from the courthouse where Eugene Davidovich just recently got out of his trial. So we will get that information to you right after this break. Stick around. It's NORML Show Live.
On the road again. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Friends, it's time we legalize the responsible use of marijuana and stop treating marijuana smokers like criminals. We're destroying the lives and careers of hundreds of thousands of good, hard-working Americans every year in this country for no good reason. There's absolutely nothing wrong with smoking pot. For more information on how you can help legalize marijuana, please contact NORML at NORML.org.
Starfish Designs, makers of the original Gandalf.
I'm Radical Russ, and when I want to relax, I always have my 17-inch long original Gandalf from Starfish Designs nearby. The hand-blown borosilicate glass is strong and easy to clean, and the design is sleek and sophisticated. Starfish Designs are available from Bend, Oregon at a glass retailer near you. For locations, call 541-788-GLASS. That's 541-788-4527. California has long been the epicenter of marijuana law reform in the United States. Every Tuesday, we're joined by Eric Brenner, the producer of the California Marijuana Report, for an interview with an important figure in cannabis in the Golden State. You can hear the entire California Marijuana Report online at California NORML's site, canormal.org, and Beverly Hills NORML at normal90210.org. Now, here with another great interview is Eric Brenner.
Russ, we continue to follow this breaking news story out of San Diego, the trial of Eugene Davinovich, a medical marijuana provider who ran a collective, sold a fake patient marijuana. The fake patient turned out to be Detective Henderson of the San Diego Police Department. Eugene Davinovich now facing 4 felony marijuana charges. Joining us now on the California Marijuana Report, attorney Mara Felsen. Mara, why were you in court today for Eugene Davinovich's trial?
I was there today because Donna Lambert was subpoenaed to appear today. She was subpoenaed by the district attorney's office to appear at 9 a.m. the first day of Eugene Davinovich's trial. These are very unusual circumstances that the subpoena came up. I actually heard the voicemail from the investigator that he left on Donna's answering machine saying that as she was aware, she's already been subpoenaed by Eugene Davinovich to appear at trial. That was the first that she had ever heard of that, and it created quite a stir. But one of her attorneys, Mike McCabe, vehemently denied ever subpoenaing her for trial, and we have no reason to believe that Mr. McCabe would be saying anything that's not accurate. So it was the district attorney's office that subpoenaed her there for trial. So that was one reason why I was there. But otherwise, in San Diego, since the district attorney has had a very liberal interpretation of the laws on the books as they pertain to medical marijuana, so it really behooves anybody that is interested in this area of law and who wants to defend people in San Diego or other counties that are hostile to the rights afforded under Prop 215. It's more education than anyone could ever get by reading any case.
Mara, let me ask you this. You were down there because of the subpoena today. What kind of feeling did you have walking into that courtroom, having to tell the district attorney and the judge that Donna Lambert will not be testifying?
Well, I never had the opportunity to do that because the first issue that was addressed was the prosecutor's office asked for another time extension. So that was what the substance of the hearing was about. First, the judge that it was assigned to initially, basically, he punted on the issue. He just assigned the case back to a judge who made a ruling on an earlier discovery motion, which was the basis of this extension of time request. So he booted the case back to this judge who had made a prior ruling that would concern the request for an extension, and that was primarily what everything concerned today. After going back and forth about schedules and reasons for continuances, the judge was very well reasoned. He seemed very impartial, in my opinion. And so what he wound up doing was granting a very brief continuance of Eugene's trial for motions in limine to be heard on March 9th and for jury selection to begin on March 10th and then to go from there.
Mara, when is the next court date for Eugene Davinovich?
The next court date is March 9th. And on March 9th, there will be, the judge will be hearing motions in limine, which are basically pretrial motions to resolve issues that are controversial outside of the presence of the jury, basically to see whether or not those things are going to be, whatever the motions concern, whether or not they're going to be able to be introduced at trial. So that's what those motions in limine, and they're being filed by both the district attorney and by Eugene's defense counsel. Those will be heard on March 9th, and jury selection will begin on March 10th.
Attorney Mara Felsen from San Diego County, thank you so much for joining us today on the California Marijuana Report.
It only comes twice a day, but I don't care. It's 4:20 somewhere.
Time to take a peek at our cannabis community calendar, which you can find at norml.org/calendar. And today, Tuesday, March 2nd, there's still some time. At 6:30 Eastern Time, the Northern Michigan Compassion Club will be meeting in Petoskey, and the Midtown Detroit Cannabis Compassion Club will be meeting in Detroit. For the Petoskey information, check out Northern Michigan Compassion Club on our calendar, norml.org/calendar. The Midtown Detroit meeting, you can email midtowndetroitcc.com or contact Mo at 313-483-1400. Also tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, Joplin NORML will be having their meeting in Joplin, Missouri at the Blackthorn Pizza and Pub. For more information, check out joplin-normal.org. On Wednesday, March 3rd, Cal State University Fresno NORML will be having their meeting at the Family Food and Science Building, room 216A. On Thursday, March 4th, the Wayne and Westland Compassion Club meeting will be taking place in Wayne, Michigan. And for more information on that, check out waynewestlandcc.ning.com. Also on Thursday, March 4th, the University of New Hampshire NORML will be having their meeting at the MUB 334, and Philadelphia NORML, Philly NORML, will be having their open meeting at the A-Space, 4722 Baltimore Avenue, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They always meet on the first and third Thursdays of the month. You can check out more information at phillynormal.org. On Saturday, March 6th, Central Ohio NORML is having a meetup at the Clintonville Panera Bread Meeting Room. This is for Central Ohio NORML, and for information on that, check out ohionormal.org. Cleveland NORML is having their meetup at the Root Cafe this Saturday, March 6th in Lakewood, Ohio. Again, ohionormal.org for more information. And finally, on Sunday, March 7th, the Branch County Compassion Club in Michigan will be meeting at Los Tequilas Restaurant in Coldwater, Michigan. Check out branchcountycc.ning.com for more information. We also got this in from our chat room. Kansas City NORML will be having a meeting this Saturday at the Westport Coffee House, located at 4010 Pennsylvania Avenue in Kansas City, Missouri. Check out kcnormal.org for details or call 888-KC-NORML. All right, when we come back from our break, we're going to talk a little bit about the strategy of medical marijuana in the 21st century and a very shocking undercover investigation from CBS News in Los Angeles regarding medical marijuana clinics. Stay tuned. This is NORML Show Live.
NORML Show Live reminds you to never smoke and drive impaired. Hang out for a while and share.
Cause the day was hard and your work was long and you need a break from all that's wrong. You better look at the clock cause it's 4:19. Time to reach in that pocket for your bag of green and smoke that weed. Smoke that weed. Smoke that weed. Smoke that
Marijuana and alcohol are the two most popular recreational drugs in America. Marijuana smoking is non-toxic, relatively safe, and has a low risk of dependence. Alcohol drinking is potentially fatal, dangerous to society, and is quite addictive. Marijuana is safer, so why are we driving people to drink? That's the question of the new book, Marijuana is Safer, so why are we driving people to drink? By Paul Armentano, Mason Tvert, and Steve Fox. Visit Amazon.com or ChelseaGreen.com today to order your copy of Marijuana is Safer, or visit MarijuanaIsSafer.com. The most devastating effect of the war on marijuana is that it is a war on everyday people like you and me. All week we speak to the doctors, scientists, celebrities, and politicians who make up the professionals fighting for cannabis liberty, but we never forget about the tens of millions who use cannabis, the millions who need medical access to cannabis, the hundreds of thousands arrested every year for cannabis, and tens of thousands imprisoned under our marijuana laws. At NORML, we are the Cannabis Consumers Lobby, and we take this opportunity to share the experiences of our cannabis community. All right, everyone, 41 after the hour, and I wanted to take some time here to talk about two subjects that kind of go together. Carrie had been mentioning many times that this Saturday I appeared at the Oregon NORML meeting, the cardholders meeting, and gave a speech on the strategy of medical marijuana. And I'm not going to do the whole speech here because, to tell you the truth, I can't remember it. I made it up on the spot. Happens sometimes. But I can give you the gist of it. And the gist of it is this. In Oregon, we've got it really good, right? We've got 24-ounce limit for possession of marijuana for people with medical cards. We have 24 plants that you're allowed to grow. The greatest statutory limits that we find in any of the medical marijuana states, with the exception of some, exceptions that we find in California under, doctors' supervision and so on. But a lot of people who have gotten their medical marijuana cards tend to fall off of the radar when it comes to marijuana activism. It's the syndrome I call, well, I got mine. Now you go get yours. And the problem with that is that medical marijuana patients can never truly be free. They can never truly get their medical needs taken care of so long as marijuana is illegal for healthy, able-bodied people like myself and the other 95% of the people who use cannabis. Here in the state of Oregon, we have somewhere around 26,000 registered patients, but we have 360,000 people in the state of Oregon who use cannabis. So it works out to, like I said, about 5% of the people who are using cannabis, they're using it medically. Now, of course, some of the people that are using it non-medically are really using it medically, right? They just didn't happen to go get a card and register. And I'm sure it's possible some of the people who are using it medically aren't really using it medically. They're just using it because they like the feeling of using cannabis. And again, I have no problem with that. I'm all for it. But where this is leading is something for us, everyone in the community, to think about. When you look at the arc of medical marijuana laws and you look at how they've evolved over time, you start to find some disturbing trends. And the disturbing trend is, in the 20th century, medical marijuana was fairly open. But as we approach, or as we're in the 21st century, we're finding the laws to be much more restrictive. For example, in the 1900s, the 1990s, 5 states legalized the use of medical marijuana. That's California, Alaska, Oregon, Washington, and Maine, all legalized in that time period. Now, of those states, California is by far the state with the least restrictive law. Any doctor can recommend medical marijuana. You don't have to have a bona fide doctor-patient relationship. You don't have to have a chronic disease. He or she can recommend for any, illness that they feel is necessary to use medical marijuana. They do allow dispensaries. They do allow home cultivation. They do protect you from arrest. You can grow up to 12 plants and have up to 8 ounces of marijuana. Again, with some exceptions. That's California, right? The first state to pass medical marijuana. Green across the board. Everything you could want from a medical marijuana law. Then, as the next few states start to pass medical marijuana, in 1998, we get Alaska, Oregon, and Washington, we start to see some more restrictions. Alaska decides that you have to have a chronic condition to get medical marijuana. Alaska and Oregon decide that a doctor can't just recommend for any old thing. You have to fit within a certain list, right? A little more restrictive. Alaska, Oregon, and Washington didn't bother to put in dispensaries in their laws so that they have a caregiver-only system. Now, they still allow home cultivation, but in Alaska and Washington, you're not necessarily protected from arrest. You could still be arrested because they don't have a card system. Now, Oregon, we do have a card system. And yet, the plant limits are still pretty high. In Alaska, you can have 6 plants. In Oregon, 24. In Washington, 15. And to be fair, that wasn't the limit when those laws were originally passed. When those laws were originally passed in Oregon and Washington, Washington's was a 60-day limit and a 60-day supply, and Oregon's was like 3 ounces or something ridiculous. But now it's 24 and 15. And 24 ounces of personal possession. So as we look through the 1990s, the laws are still fairly open. You can still grow at home. You're mostly protected from arrest. You have plant limits at 6 plants or greater, and you're able to carry a decent amount of medical marijuana. Now, as we get into the 2000s, though, throughout that decade, we find medical marijuana being more and more restricted. Now, Colorado probably has the best of the medical marijuana laws that were passed in the 2000s. Colorado's is a constitutional amendment. You don't have to have a chronic condition. You do have to have a bona fide doctor-patient relationship, but they do have dispensaries, home cultivation, protection from arrest, a fairly low plant limit, though, 6 plants, and very low medicine limit, 2 ounces. And this is something we find as a trend for all of the states that have passed medical marijuana since the state of Washington. Not one of them has passed a medical marijuana law that allows anything more than 6 ounces. In fact, the only state since then that has allowed up to 6 ounces is New Mexico. All the rest of the states since 2000 only allow 3 ounces or less. And Nevada and Montana, only 1 ounce is allowed. We found some further things happening as these medical marijuana laws got passed. More and more states started requiring this bona fide doctor-patient relationship, which is just, code word for not having pot docs, right? And there's also most of them not allowing dispensaries. The few that did, New Mexico allowed dispensaries, but that's run through their state, right? So we don't have the same sort of situation. It's a little more restrictive. But still, all of those states throughout the 2000s allowed for home cultivation and had fairly decent plant limits, anywhere from 6 plants to 16 plants in New Mexico. But now in 2010, when we take a look at the most recent medical marijuana law that's been passed in the state of New Jersey, you have to have a chronic condition, you have to have a bona fide doctor-patient relationship, and you are not allowed to grow your own medicine. The first of the 14 medical marijuana states that is not allowing home grow. Now, there are some other states that have tried to pass medical marijuana. New Hampshire, Minnesota, Pennsylvania's still working on it. New York's still working on it. Arizona's got an initiative. And in each one of these that are coming up in this next decade of the 2010s, we're finding more and more restrictions. We're finding in the Arizona initiative that they won't allow you to cultivate your own marijuana if you live within 25 miles of a dispensary, the so-called HALO rule. The Minnesota bill, like I mentioned earlier in the news, that was vetoed by Governor Pawlenty, required that you had a not just chronic, but terminal condition before you could qualify for medical marijuana. In New Hampshire, that once again, not going to allow people to grow at home. New York's bill that's going through the assembly right now, not going to allow people to grow at home. The Pennsylvania bill, restricting to, once again, a very small list of chronic conditions and not allowed to grow at home. So if we want to continue this strategy of pursuing medical marijuana, I got news for you folks. It ain't getting any better. Medical marijuana is not getting any better. In fact, it's getting more and more restrictive and more regulated and more of a tight situation that is again putting marijuana into this category that I fear we don't really want to see it put into. And this is something I always warned about when we started this medical marijuana idea, is that by saying marijuana is medical and that is only limited to people who are sick and dying, we are giving credence to the prohibitionist notion that that marijuana itself is so dangerous that you have to be sick to be able to use it. We are giving credence to their beliefs by saying marijuana is medical only. We're setting it up to be as restricted and controlled as other scheduled medications. This also came up when we talked in the Oregon NORML meeting about Oregon rescheduling marijuana from Schedule 1 down to Schedule 2 through Schedule 5. We got something similar going on in Iowa with their Board of Pharmacy, and we have other states that have already taken that step and moved marijuana out of the Schedule 1, which is no medical use whatsoever, down into Schedule 2 through Schedule 5. Well, once again, Schedule 2 through Schedule 5 say that these drugs have potential for abuse, they can be dangerous, and they must have a doctor's supervision. So where does that leave you and me, dear Toker? It turns us from a dirty, degenerate criminal in possession of an illegal drug to someone in possession of a prescription medicine without a prescription. And you're just as busted. I mean, really, if you had a pocket of OxyContin pills and you didn't have a prescription for them, you might be looking at jail time. That's a Schedule 2 drug. That's medical. So we need to really fight at this point for marijuana legalization. I believe we're at a crossroads here where we've used medical marijuana enough now that people have used it enough now and enough people have been exposed to it now that they do understand that it's medical, it does have medical properties, and they're willing to entertain the notion of legalization. But we haven't gone so far yet as to cement medical marijuana's status as only medical marijuana. And I'm afraid if we continue with more and more states going into medical, especially these strict East Coast style states going into the super lockdown medical, that we're going to get farther and farther away from the goal of legalization because more and more industries will crop up around that medical only. We talked about that insurance in California at the top of the news, right? We'll have more and more stuff built up around this system of medicalization that it'll be just as hard to get out of that as it is to get out of the system of prohibition. It's time to legalize now. Now, as to why this is happening, why are we having these new laws coming up where it's so deadly dangerous? And of course, we've talked before on the show about how police come in uniform with their guns strapped to their belt into the legislature and scare the legislators with these terrible stories of how California's out of control and medical marijuana's out of control. But you know what? I found something today from CBS News in Los Angeles. This was forwarded to me on one of my drug lists, of an undercover investigation from the CBS station down there in Los Angeles going into medical marijuana clinics and getting themselves a medical marijuana recommendation and having never seen a doctor. Never seen a doctor, right? Now, personally, I don't have a problem with that, right? Because I think everyone should be able to use medical marijuana. I don't think you need anyone's permission. Not a doctor, not a preacher, not your parents. You, as an adult, have the right to use cannabis. I believe that firmly till the day I die. But since we are in this frame of medical marijuana, and for so long we've been telling our opponents, no, it's medicine, it's medicine, it's medicine, you need a doctor, it's medicine. When they hear stories like this, they believe we're all liars.
LA is about to implement some of the toughest restrictions in the state on medical marijuana. Tonight, in an exclusive CBS 2 News hidden camera investigation, we go undercover into medical clinics and expose how marijuana prescriptions are being sold without ever seeing a doctor. CBS 2 investigative reporter David Goldstein has the story.
This man answers to the name of Dr. Scott when he provides patients with what amounts to a prescription for medical marijuana. We don't know if he's smoking some of his own medicine in that pipe or tobacco when we caught him in his car outside the clinic. We do know he's not a doctor.
Yeah, that really does wonders for our public image, doesn't it? When somebody claiming to be a doctor, treating this as a serious medicine, is puffing a pipe in the back parking lot in his car, right? And they don't know whether it was cannabis, but I kind of saw what the pipe looked like. It was cannabis, right? It's not like when I go to my doctor, I find her back in the back parking lot popping OxyContin or something, right? You know, it's treated seriously. It's supposed to be a serious medicine, right? The undercover investigation continues.
At another location across town, this place bills itself as a doctor's office, But when we were there was no doctor, just pot prescriptions for sale and medical marijuana.
It's like Candyland.
We found it over and over.
Just sign here to make it legal.
Obtaining certificates to buy medical marijuana without ever seeing a doctor.
Yeah, obtaining medical marijuana without ever seeing a doctor. Now, again, like I said, I don't have a problem with that personally. But as someone in the media here trying to defend the medical marijuana system that's been voted into 14 states, this does not make our job at NORML any easier when we're talking to legislators in the New York Assembly about regulating the medical use of marijuana when they can point to something that gets emailed to them from prohibitionists out in California talking about how it's all a fraud and people are just in it for the money and all these clinics are popping up and all these dispensaries are popping up and it's all about money and it's not really about medicine. Right? This is their kind of ammunition.
Dr. Resch admits he prescribes medical marijuana, but claims he has nothing to do with this clinic.
I mean, it's a forgery.
So we've got forgeries, fraud going on here in some, and again, I'm not painting with a broad brush here. I'm not saying this is all clinics. I'm not even saying it's a majority of clinics or even most of the clinics. But again, it only takes a few bad apples to spoil the whole bunch, doesn't it?
That's not the only place we obtain certificates without ever seeing a doctor.
Are you a doctor?
This man said he works under a doctor, whatever that means. We got a recommendation from him one day.
Hello.
The next day we went there, he was the receptionist.
So yeah, again, those kind of reports are not going to do us any favors. This is why we so desperately need to legalize now, before more of this medical marijuana continues to run and more people who can continue to make black market price profits with white market legitimacy continue to take advantage of this system and make it look bad for all of us. And I'm specifically calling out to the medical marijuana patients today to get behind legalization and to avoid that feeling of, well, I got mine. What am I worried about? I'll just smoke my bowl. I'm fine. No, medical marijuana patients, the responsibility is on you more than anyone to be fighting for legalization. Not just because it's in your own best interest to prevent the home invasion robberies and the stupid restrictive laws and the registration lists and all of the fallout that we get from medical marijuana having to exist in a prohibitionist system, but also because you owe us. You owe me and every other recreational toker out there who ever voted for a medical marijuana law. Because I'll tell you what, if it had only been medical marijuana patients voting for these laws would have never passed. These laws passed because the vast majority of people who smoke marijuana realize it's no big deal, and they said, well, okay, maybe I can't be legal, but for God's sake, you at least got to let the cancer patients have some. You at least got to let the AIDS patients have some. Well, it's been 14 years now. It's been 14 years and over 850,000 arrests per year on average since medical marijuana has been passed. Yeah, maybe not on average over those entire 14 years, but damn, it's a lot of people who have been arrested, had their lives turned upside down, their kids taken away, their dogs shot, their organ transplants denied because it's illegal because they're just not sick enough. So you medical marijuana patients, you're the ones who need to get behind legalization stronger than anyone out there. And believe me, we're here for you. We'll be here fighting with you side by side, but we got it legal for you. It's time for you to help make it legal for us. Nobody deserves a cage for marijuana, even if they're healthy, even if they're an atheist. They do not deserve a cage for marijuana, period. All right, I'm Radical Russ. Thank you for joining me for another one of my patented rants there. I have a little fun doing those things. On tomorrow's show, it is our Wednesday dose of cannabis science. We'll be visiting with Dr. Mitch Earlywine, taking your live questions in the chat on cannabis science, history, culture, medicine, and more. You can also catch the replays of this show at 3, 5, 7, and 9 Pacific time, or you can download it for yourself as a podcast on iTunes or by visiting our blog at stash.normal.org. Also, you can follow us on Twitter. I'm Radical Russ on Twitter. And you can send me an email at stash@normal.org.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. And it goes down smooth.
For everyone here at the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, I'm Radical Russ Belville, your National Outreach Coordinator, reminding you to take care of each other, tokers.
This is NORML Show Live, the voice of the Marijuana Nation.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.